Heaven Official's Blessing. Guan by Mo Xiang Dong Xiao. Read by Plant Bones. Chapter 8, Part 2. Shortened Distances. Adrift in Sandstorms. Xiang spun wildly in the sky. He threw out his arm and cried, "Rue, grab hold of something dependably solid." Rue shot out from within Xiang's sleeve. In the next moment, he could feel the other end of the white bandage sink as if it was tied to something, and it yanked him to a stop. After finally stabilizing himself in the crazed wind, Xiang realized that he had been blown over 30 meters above the ground. Xiang was now like a kite, attached to the ground by only a single thread. And with sand whipping at his face, he held fast and tried to see what exactly Rue had tied itself to. Squinting and blinking, Xiang finally recognized a red silhouette. The other end of Rue seemed to be wrapped around the wrist of the youth in red. Xiang told Rue to grab a hold of something dependably solid, and it grabbed onto Sunlung. Xiang didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He was about to command Rue to grab onto something else when it pulled on his arm and suddenly he grew lighter. Xiang's heart sank. This wasn't the feeling of Rue being released, but something much worse. Sure enough, the red silhouette suddenly grew closer and was soon within reach. Sunlung had been dragged into the windstorm too. Xiang tried to shout, "Don't panic," to him, but the moment he opened his mouth, he got another mouthful of sand. At this point, Xiang had gotten used to eating sand. He wanted to tell Sunlung not to panic, but in all honesty, he didn't think the boy would fret in the slightest. Rue continued to withdraw back to Xiang, closing the distance between him and the boy who had just been blown into the sky. As he suspected, Sunlung didn't look the least bit anxious, appearing as if he could calmly open a book and read right then and there. Xiang wondered if Sunlung had gotten dragged in on purpose. Rue wrapped itself around the waists of the two of them to tie them together. Xiang hugged onto Sunlung, then commanded, "Go try again, but don't bring up any more people." The silk band shot out once again, but this time it grabbed onto Nanfeng and Fuyao. Xiang felt drained. "Rue," he said tiredly, "I said no people. I didn't mean it so All right." Xiang twisted himself toward the ground and shouted, "Nanfeng, Fuyao, hang on tight." Down below, of course, Nanfeng and Fuyao did their utmost to try and anchor themselves, but the winds were simply too strong. Soon, to no one's surprise, another two silhouettes joined them in the twister. Now all four of them were swirling about the air at high speed. Within the dark yellowness between the heavens and the earth, the twister was like a slanted pillar reaching the sky. Four silhouettes tied together by a white silk band were whirling non-stop within, going faster and faster, higher and higher. "How did you both get blown up here too?" Xiang shouted, during all the sand blowing into his mouth. All they could see was sand, and all they could hear was wind. They had no choice but to use their loudest voices to shout to each other. "Ask your dumb Rue!" Fuyao yelled back, spitting out sand as quickly as he got mouthfuls of it. Xiang seized his dumb Rue with both hands and said woefully, "Oh, Rue, all four of us are counting on you now. Please, absolutely do not grab the wrong thing this time. Now go." With heroic solemnity, Xiang released Rue once more. "Stop relying on that toy! Think of something else!" Nanfeng roared. But just then, Xiang felt a tug from the other end of the silk band and lit it up. "Wait, give it one more chance. It's caught something." "Better not be a random passerby. Let the poor person go," Fuyao roared too. Xiang was also afraid of the same thing. He tugged back at Rue, but it remained taut and firm, and Xiang let out a breath of relief. It's something solid, quite stable." He then commanded Rue, "Pull." Rue Rue rapidly shortened against the force of the crazed twister. The four silhouettes were quickly pulled out of the wind pillar. Gradually, in the midst of the boundless yellow sand, Celian could make out the contours of something large, black, and half round down below. The landmark was extremely big, about the size of a small temple. It was what Rue had latched onto. When they came closer to the ground, Celian could finally see that this round structure was actually a giant boulder. In a windstorm of such force, this boulder was like a solid, silent fortress. No doubt the perfect shelter. While on the road earlier, however, none of them had seen such a rock. Who knew how far that strange twister had taken them? When they landed, they immediately circled around to the back of the boulder to shelter from the wind. The moment they went around, understanding dawned on Celian. Thank the heaven official's blessing. Turned out, in the back of the boulder there was an opening. The hole was as wide as two doors, but only half the height of one. Although a bit low, it was still possible for a grown person to enter if they bent down. The hole's opening was jagged and slanted, but it appeared to be haphazardly man-made rather than naturally formed. When Celian entered, he discovered that the inside of the boulder was hollowed out and quite deep. It was dark further inside, so he didn't bother trying to look around and settled down where there was light. He brushed the sand off Rue and wrapped it back on his wrist. Nanfeng and Fu Yao were both spitting out sand and covered it from head to toe, from their eyes to their ears to their mouths and noses and all over their clothes. They peeled off the outer robes and they shook them out. They were heavy with fine grains of sand. Of the four of them, only Sun Lang looked unruffled, as he lazily dusted himself off and made himself proper again. Other than his lopsided ponytail, his carefree form remained unaffected. That ponytail had been tied by Celian and was askew to begin with, so a little wind made no noticeable difference anyways. Nanfeng wiped his face and started cursing while Celian dumped sand from his bamboo hat. I didn't think you two would get pulled in as well. Why didn't you use the 1,000-pound weight spell? We did. It was useless. Nanfeng spat angrily. From the side, Fuyao was still ferociously shaking sand out of his outer robe, and equally ferociously, where do you think we are? This is a desert in the northwest, not the main domain of my general. Nanfeng continued. The north is the territory of the two general... Wait. Nanfeng continued. The north is the territory of the two generals Pei, and the west belongs to Yishan. You won't find a Nanyang temple within a 100-kilometer radius of this place. There was a saying in the mortal realm that even if a powerful my tongue keeps twisting today. There was a saying in the mortal realm that even a powerful dragon cannot win against the local snakes. As Nanfeng and Fuyao were deputy generals of the southeast and southwest, it couldn't be helped that their powers were restricted when they tried to use them outside their own territories. Seeing their incredibly sullen and frustrated faces, Simeon thought that this was perhaps the first time they were sent flying by a huge wind to tumble in circles without any way to land. You two have worked very hard. Sunlong sat down next to him and propped up his cheek with his hand. So, are we just going to sit here until the storm blows over? Looks like we have to. Celian turned to him and replied, As strong as that twister is, it can't possibly blow a giant rock into the sky. You never know. Like you said, there's something off about that wind. A sudden thought came to Celian. Sunlung, may I ask a question? Ask away, Sunlung replied. That state preceptor by Yue, is it a man or a woman? Celian asked. Did I not mention earlier? She's a woman. Just as I suspected, Celian thought. Earlier, when we were resting at the abandoned inn, didn't we see two figures passing by? Their steps were graceful and strange, definitely not those of a mortal, and the one in white was a female cultivator. Fuyao looked doubtfully. It's not easy to identify whether they were a man or woman by the robes, and they looked taller than the average woman. Are you sure you saw right? I'm absolutely sure, Xielian said. So I thought she might be the state preceptor of Baiyue. It's possible, Nanfeng said. But there was another black-clad figure traveling with her. Who would that be? Hard to say. But that other person was walking even faster than she was. Their strength is definitely no less than hers, Xielian said. Could it have been the other evil state preceptor? Oh, wrong person. Could it have been the other evil state preceptor, Fang Xin? Fia wondered. Who is saying that? Sorry, I was trying to figure out who's saying that. I think regarding that, the whole dual evil masters title was only given because historically their actions were similar. Both were equally evil, so people connected them together as a pair to remember them more easily. Like the four great calamities of the ghost realm, even if there aren't really four that fit, they're made for because it's simpler. Hearing Xielian say this, Sunlong burst out laughing. Xielian stared at him. It's nothing, Sunlong said. I just thought what you said made sense. One of the four in the four great calamities is certainly only there for the head count. Please continue. Xielian continued. In reality, the dual evil masters have nothing to do with each other. I've heard of the state preceptor Fang Xin. He was the state preceptor of Yang'an, born at least 100 years earlier than the state preceptor Bai Yue. You don't know of the four calamities in the ghost realm, but you know the state preceptor Fang Xin of Yang'an in the mortal realm? Fu Yao asked in disbelief. I overheard things while collecting scraps in the mortal realm. It's not like I collect scraps in the ghost realm, so of course I don't learn anything about them, Xiaolian explained. The wind outside of the cave seemed to be dying down. Nanfeng approached the opening of their shelter, patting the rocky surface here and there, inspecting its material. He stared fixated at it for a moment, then lowered his head. Why would there be a hollow rock like this in the middle of the desert? He thought the boulder was rather suspicious, but Xiaolian wasn't surprised by it. Hollowed boulders like this aren't unusual. The people of Baiyue used to build shelters like these to hide from sandstorms, or even for passing the night while taking their livestock to graze. Some holes weren't dug, but rather blown out. How could they graze in the desert? Nanfeng asked, confused. Xiaolian smiled. It wasn't all desert here 200 years ago. There used to be an oasis. Gogo, Sunlong called. What is it? Xiaolian turned his head. Sunlong raised his hand and pointed. The rock you're sitting on seems to have writing on it. What? Xiaolian looked down, then stood up and found where he had been sitting was actually a stele, a carved stone monument. After wiping off a layer of dust, there were indeed letters on its surface. However, the characters were carved rather shallowly, so the words weren't very clear. At least half the stele was still buried, and the words stretched from beneath the sand all the way up until they faded into blackness. If there was writing here, it had to be examined. I don't have much power left. Can someone lend me a palm light? Thanks, Xiaolian asked. Nanfeng snapped his fingers, and a small burst of flame ignited in his palm. Xiaolian stole a glance at Sunlong, but the youth didn't appear surprised. Xiaolian supposed that after seeing the teleportation array, there wasn't much more to be surprised about. Nanfeng moved his palm to where Xiaolian directed him, to brighten the writing on the stone stele. The characters were incredibly odd, slanting as if randomly, scribbled by a toddler. What is this? Baiyue script, duh, Sunlong replied. I'm sure Nanfeng asked the meaning of the words, Xiaolian said. Let me see. Xiaolian dusted off more sand from the stone stele, revealing the first column of writing with the largest characters. That had to be the heading. The same characters also appeared repeatedly in various sections of the text. Fu Yao approached and produced a palm torch. You know how to read Banyue script? Truth be told, I collected scraps in Banyue before that evil master of Banyue, or whoever, came about, Cielian replied. Is there something wrong? Nothing, Fuyao humphed. Just wondering where you haven't collected junk. Cielian flashed a smile, then looked down again at the characters. A moment later, he suddenly said, General. What? Nanfeng and Fuyao answered at the same time. Cielian looked up. The first word on the stone celle is general. He paused for a moment. But there's another character after it that I'm unsure of the meaning of it. Nanfeng seemed to sigh in relief. Then you best look some more. Cielian nodded, and Nanfeng shifted his palm over to further light up the words. Something didn't feel right, Cielian thought. There seemed to be something else on the periphery of his vision. With both hands pressed on the rock, Cielian slowly looked up. Above the stone stele, the flickering flames illuminated a stiff human face. This face, with bulging eyes, was staring straight at him. The one who screamed wasn't Cielian or Nanfeng, but that stiff face. Nanfeng immediately took out his other hand and ignited it as well. He put both hands together and grew the flames until they were bright enough to light the entire cave. The one whose face was revealed by the light was the person who had been hiding in the shadows the whole time. When the flames grew bigger, he scurried along the walls toward the back of the cave, and there Cielian saw 7 or 8 people huddled together and trembling in fear. Who are you? Nanfeng shouted. Nanfeng's angry shout echoed in the cave, and Cielian, whose ears were still ringing from the scream earlier, covered his ears. Noise from the windstorm had deafened him, and anything spoken too softly wasn't heard. After they entered the cave, they had discussed the evil master of Banyue, then focused their attention on deciphering the stone stele, so no one had noticed there were others also hiding within their shelter. The 7 or 8 people trembled. A moment later, an elder of 50 or so stammered. We're a merchant caravan, passing through the area. Just ordinary merchants. The sandstorm's too fierce, and we're hiding in here for the time being. He was the most composed in the group, and by the looks of it, the leader. Nanfeng asked, If you're just ordinary merchants, why are you sneaking around and hiding so furtively? The elder was about to respond when a youth of about 17 years shouted, We weren't planning on sneaking around, but you guys suddenly rushed in here. Who knows whether you're good or evil? Then we suddenly heard you talk about the evil master Banyue, then some ghost realm stuff, and you ignited fire in your palms. We thought you guys were Banyue soldiers out patrolling and hunting for flesh. No way we'd make a sound. Stop talking, Tian. The old man hushed the boy, afraid that he might offend the other party. The youth had thick brows and large eyes, with the face and mind of a tiger. As soon as the elder spoke, he shut up immediately. Cielian put down his hands, his ears no longer ringing, and said amiably, It's nothing but a misunderstanding. Just a misunderstanding. Let's all relax a bit. No need to be so nervous. He paused for a moment before continuing to explain. We're not Banyue soldiers. I'm just a cultivator from a small shrine. These are people from my shrine. We only know a few tricks, nothing fancy. You're ordinary merchants, and we're ordinary cultivators without malicious intent. So it just so happens that we entered the same shelter to hide away from the same sandstorm. His voice was soft and gentle, each word spoken slowly to calm everyone's nerves. After much explanation and reassurance, the merchant party finally relaxed. Yet unexpectedly, Sunlung suddenly laughed. I think they're being way too humble. Those merchants aren't as simple as they say they are. No one understood what he meant and looked at him in confusion. Don't at least half the travelers go missing when trekking through Banyue Pass? To cross this land while knowing that rumor, surely you're all extraordinarily brave. Nothing ordinary about you. That's not all true, young man, the elder responded. Beside the fact that the rumors are largely exaggerated, there are many caravans that have passed through without harm before. Oh? Sun Lung said. As long as you find the right guide and go around the Banyue territory, all is well. So we sought out and found a local to lead us, the elder said. Yeah, the youth Tiansen shouted. It all depends on the guide. We owe everything to Azanga. If not for him, we wouldn't have been able to avoid all those quicksand pits. When the sandstorm started, he knew exactly where to bring us to hide. Otherwise, we would have been buried alive in sand by now. Xiaolian took a glance at this Aziao, who guided them, looked rather young, seemingly in his 20s, with an attractive, stony face. When he was praised by the other two, he didn't make a show of it. His head was down, and he mumbled, It's nothing, just doing my duty. Hopefully, when the wind dies down, none of the camels or cargo will be damaged. They'll be fine for sure. The merchants were all very optimistic, but Xiaolian had the feeling things weren't as simple as they all thought. If all the trouble could be avoided simply by not crossing into Banyue territory, then did all the former travelers who lost their lives because they didn't believe the rumors? Jillian gave it some thought and said to Nanfeng and Fu Yao in a quiet voice, This is all too sudden. Once the storm passes, we'll need to make sure that these people pass through safely before going to Banyue ruins. Then Celian looked back down to continue deciphering the Banyue writing on the stone stele. He recognized the word general earlier, but that was because it was a common word. It had been 200 years since he last visited the kingdom of Banyue. Even if he was fluent then, it had all been forgotten since. Shouldering the burden of translation really required time and patience. Just then, Sun Lung said, Tomb of the General. Celian remembered now. The last character was the one for tomb, grave, burial, and other similar terms. He looked at him again, amazed. Sunlung, do you know the Banyue script too? Sunlung smiled. Not very much. I only know a few words because they're interesting. Xielin was already used to him saying that. The word tomb was not often used. If Sunlung really knew not too much, then how could he just happen to know exactly what this one character meant? His not too much probably meant the same as ask away, and Xielin grinned immediately. Excellent. Maybe the characters you recognize happen to be the ones I don't know. Come closer, let's examine this together. Xielian waved lightly to beckon Sunlung, so Sunlung went over. Nanfeng and Fu Yao stood next to them, lighting the tomb with their palm torches for them to read. Xielian lightly touched the words with his fingers, reviewing the writing in a low voice with Sunlung, softly reading the words. The more they read, the more amazed they looked, before gradually growing glummer. The merchant boy Tianxing was young, and youths were prone to curiosity. After the little chat earlier, it was as if they had become familiar, so he called out, Gogo, what does it say on the stele? Cillian snapped out of it and replied, This stone stele is a memorial. It tells the story of the life of a general. Are you a general? No, a Central Plains general. Oh, wrong person. No, a Central Plains general, Sun Lung answered. A Central Plains general? Nanfeng was puzzled. Why would the people of Banyue build a memorial for a Central Plainsman? I thought the two nations were constantly at war with each other. This general was special, Sun Lung replied, although the memorial calls him a general, who's actually no more than a captain. Was he promoted to general later? No. At the beginning, he'd led a troop of hundreds, but it dwindled to a troop of 70, then 50. In other words, continued demotion. The feeling of being demoted to the point of nothing was quite familiar to Celian, and he could feel eyes on him. He pretended not to notice and continued deciphering the Banyue writing. Tianxing couldn't understand and continued asking, what kind of official gets demoted lower and lower in rank? As long as you didn't make any major mistakes, there should only be delays in promotion. Not demotion, right? How much of a failure do you have to be? Celian clenched his right hand in a fist and raised it to his lips. He faintly cleared his throat and replied in a stern voice, Young man, receiving continuous demotion is not as rare as you think. Huh? Sunlong chuckled. It's true. It happens a lot. He paused before continuing. This captain got demoted time and time again, not because he was incapable or incompetent. It's because, despite poor relations on both sides of the conflict, instead of winning battles on the battlefield, he kept getting in the way. What do you mean, getting in the way? Nanfeng asked. He prevented his enemies from killing civilians in the Central Plains, and he also blocked his own army from killing the people of Baiyue. Every time he did this, he got demoted a rank. Sunlong spoke lightheartedly, and the 7 or 8 merchants sat closer to him like it was a story time. Soon they got into it and started commenting. I don't think the captain did anything wrong, Tian remarked. It shouldn't be a problem to let soldiers kill each other, but not civilians, right? He's too blindly kind for a soldier, but overall he didn't commit any crimes. Yeah, he was saving lives, not killing people. Castilian smiled at all the comments. The merchants before them had never lived a day in a battle-torn border. They were not the same people as those here 200 years ago. The kingdom of Bayeux had long since perished. It was easy for them to say this, criticize that, even give compliments, but the actions of that captain weren't so easily forgiven back then. Not with a simple remark like, he's too blindly kind. Within the group, only Aziao understood better, probably because he was a local. Now is now. 200 years ago is 200 years ago. To only receive demotions was a blessing for this captain. Fu Yao, however, clicked his tongue. Laughable. Xiaolian could pretty much guess what he was about to say and rubbed his forehead. Sure enough, the light flickering flames illuminated Fu Yao's glum look. One must do the duty demanded by their position. If he became a soldier, then he must always remember to defend his country and kill enemies on the front lines. Casualties are inevitable in war. Such soft-heartedness has no place in war and will only drag down his fellow soldiers. His enemies will also think him foolish. No one will thank him in the end. Fu Yao's words had irrefutable logic, and silence soon filled the cave. He continued dryly. People like that have only one end. Death. They will either die in battle or at the hands of their own people. After being struck speechless for a moment, Xiaolian broke the silence. Yeah, you're right. He did die. Tianxiang was shocked. Ah? How'd he die? Was he really killed by his own people? After a moment of deliberation, Xiaolian still replied in the end. Uh, Not really. Here it says there was once a battle when both sides clashed, and as they fought, this man's bootlaces came loose and he stepped on them, tripped, and then everyone in the cave had assumed the death must have been tragic, but heroic. But they were all taken aback at first, thinking what kind of death was that? Then laughter exploded. He was trampled by soldiers on both sides, who were blinded by murderous rage, and was cut down by a mess of random weapons. Is it that funny? Sunlong quirked a brow. Xiaolian also piped up. Yeah, it's rather tragic. Let's be more sympathetic and not laugh, okay? We're in his tomb after all, let's give him some face. I don't mean anything malicious by laughing, Tiansheng immediately claimed. But it's just so... There was nothing Xiaolian could do. Reading the epithets to his point, even he wanted to laugh. He didn't comment and continued on to translate. In any case, though this captain didn't have a good reputation in the army, some of the border citizens of both Baiyue and Yong'an were grateful in his efforts, so they called him General. They built this simple stone tomb for him and erected the stone stele to remember him by. Later, the people of Baiyue discovered another miraculous thing about this memorial. As long as one kowtows before the stone stele 3 times, one can transform all disasters met in the Gobi to good fortune. Sunlun completed the translation. He spoke so enigmatically that it was very convincing. His expression was also serious. So when the group heard, several of them immediately started prostrating, muttered that they rather believe in true than not. Cielian, however, was confused. What is that written there? Is it really that magical? Sunling smiled softly and said in a lowered voice, No, I made that up. But since they laughed earlier, their prostrating now should make up for it. Celian looked back at the stone stele and saw it was indeed the end of the epithet. And there were no more words. He had been feeling a bit woeful, but now thought it funny. He whispered back, Why are you so mischievous? Sunlung stuck out his tongue, then the two chuckled. Just then someone shrieked, What's this? The shriek echoed in the cave, sharply reverberating against the walls, and it caused their hairs to stand up. Cielian instantly turned toward where the shriek came from and demanded, What happened? Where the merchants were once prostrating, everyone had jumped up in a flash and scurried away in fear and alarm. Snake! Nanfeng and Fuyao moved their palms toward the commotion and lit up the ground in that direction. Curled on the sandy floor was a slender, brilliantly colored snake. Why is there a snake? The crowd was growing increasingly anxious. How did the snake not make any noise? We didn't hear it when it slithered over at all. When the flames appeared near the snake, it instantly became alert and raised itself into attack position. Nanfeng was about to torch it when someone leisurely strolled over. The person easily snatched the snake with his left hand, clutching at its heart. He brought it closer to observe and said, Isn't it normal to see snakes in the desert? Someone that fearlessly gusty was, of course, Sunlung. They say to fight a snake, seize it at its heart. If pressed hard enough, no matter how venomous its fangs, it'll be helpless. The snake wrapped its long tail around Sunlung's left arm meekly. At closer range, Alien could see clearly. The snake had translucent skin, and its vivid red insides were visible and mixed with threads of black resembling organs. Rather disgusting. The tail was the color of flesh and segmented with layers of hard shell, unlike that of a snake, more like a scorpion. Seeing this, Xialian's face changed and he called out, Watch out for its tail! Before Xialian finished speaking, the long snake body wrapped around Sunlung's left arm and suddenly let go. The tail snapped backwards and tried to stab viciously towards Sunlung. Venomous as the tail was, Sunlung's right hand was faster, and he easily caught it. Now holding both the head and the tail, Sunlung showed off the snake to Xialian, like it was an interesting toy, laughing. This snake's tail is pretty interesting. On the end of the tail there was a long, flesh-cut red needle. Xialian sighed in relief. I'm glad you weren't stung, as I thought it's a scorpion snake. Nanfeng and Fuyao approached to observe the snake too. Scorpion snake? That's right, Xialian said. It's a kind of venomous vermin found only in Baiyue. They're very rare. I've never seen one before, but I've heard of them. Body of a snake, tail of a scorpion. Its venom has the strength of both combined, and if bitten or stung... Xialian trailed off. He watched Sunlung twisting the snake, pulling and squeezing as if it were a towel, stopping just short of tying it into a bow. Xialian was speechless for a moment, then gently chided. Sunlung, stop playing with the poor thing. It's dangerous. Sunlung laughed. Don't worry, Gaga. It's nothing. The scorpion snake is a totem of the Banyue State Preceptor. Gotta take this rare chance to examine it. Xialian blinked. The totem of the Banyue State Preceptor? That's right, Sunlung replied. Apparently, it was because the State Preceptor could control these scorpion snakes that the people of Banyue believed in her infinite powers and worshipped her. Hearing the word control alarmed Xialian. When it came to controlling anything, whatever it might be, it usually came in huge numbers. He immediately cried, "Everyone leave this cave. There may be more than one scorpion snake." Before he could finish, there came a wail. "Ah! Snake!" Other voices started yelling, "So many snakes! Over here, too!" From the shadows, 7 or 8 scorpion snakes soundlessly slithered into the cave. They came so swiftly and quietly from unknown crevices, but they didn't attack, only watched, judging, soundless in both movement and attack, not even hissing, truly extremely dangerous. Nanfeng and Fuyao released 2 fireballs and shot them toward the snakes, and a large ball of fire exploded inside the cave. "Get out!" Celian yelled. No one needed to be told twice, and everyone ran outside. Luckily, it was still light out, and the twister had long since passed. The wind calmed. The group of them escaped into the open ground and kept running. As they ran, someone said, "That stone memorial is so scary. How come after we kowtowed 3 times, we still ran into stuff like that?" Xialian was thankful they didn't know the last words were fabricated by Sunlang. But then he heard someone else say, "Yeah, it's pretty much the same effects as worshipping the scrap immortal. The more you pray, the unluckier you become." Okay. Even when the issue was barely related to him, he still got shot. Celian was speechless. Suddenly, Tian yelped in alarm. "Uncle Xiang!" The elder that he had been assisting had collapsed. Celian darted over. What happened? Pain filled the face of the old man Xiang, and he raised a shaky hand. Celian grabbed a hold of his hand and frowned, his heart sinking. There was a growing, angry, swelling, spreading rapidly down his palm, and within the red and purple bruising there were 2 small punctures, barely visible. A wound that tiny would have otherwise been noticed. A wound that tiny would not have been noticed until it was too late otherwise. "Everyone check to see if you have any wounds on your bodies," Celian called out immediately. "If you do, use a rope to stop the spread." Celian turned the hand over to examine his meridians and saw that the red and purple swelling was visibly climbing up the veins of the arm. What a formidable venom, Celian thought. He was just about to unravel Rue when next to him, Aziao ripped a strip of fabric from his own clothing and promptly knotted it tightly around the old man's bicep to prevent the venom from progressing. Celian mentally praised him. He looked up, without needing to say anything. Nanfeng had already taken out a medicine bottle and popped out a pill. Celian helped the old man swallow it. "Uncle, are you okay?" Tiansheng cried. "Aziao, Uncle won't die, will he?" Aziao shook his head. "To be bitten by the scorpion snake means certain death within 4 hours." Tiansheng was shaken. Then what do we do?" Old Man Seng was the leader of the caravan, and the other merchants had also started panicking. "Our friend here just gave him the pill, right?" "That wasn't an antidote," Nanfeng said. "It's for temporary longevity. The most it can give him is 24 hours. The crowd became even more distressed. "Only 24 hours? Does that mean we can only sit here and wait for death to come? Is there no saving him from this venom?" Right then, Sunlung walked over slowly. "There's a way." Everyone turned to stare at him. Tiansheng turned his head joyously. "Xiaoke, if there's a way, why didn't you say so? Gave me a fright." However, Aziao stayed silent and shook his head. "Of course it's not easy for him to say," Sunlong said. "How could he possibly tell you that the bitten can only be saved at the cost of everyone else's lives?" "Sunlong, what do you mean?" Xialian asked. "Gaga, do you know the story behind the scorpion snake?" Sunlong asked. "In the legends, many hundreds of years ago, there was once a king of Banyue who, while hunting, inadvertently caught 2 spirits born from 2 venomous creatures, one snake and one scorpion. The 2 venom spirits cultivated deep within the mountains, ignorant of what the world and causing no afflictions. Nevertheless, the king considered their nature and believed it would cause evil sooner or later, so he decided to execute them. They begged for their lives to be spared, but the king was cruel. He forced the two creatures to mate in front of him and his ministers to serve as entertainment at one of his many banquets, and after the feast they were executed. Only the queen pitied the two creatures, but she feared going against the will of the king, so all she could do was pick up the leaf of a fragment of fern and cast it out to cover their corpses. The snake and the scorpion became vengeful spirits, immensely resentful, and they cursed the descendants born of their mating to forever remain in the kingdom of Baiue to destroy its people. Ever since then, scorpion snakes were found only within Baiue territory. Should anyone be bitten or stung, the venom would spread through their body like wildfire, and they would die a miserable death. However, thanks to that one act of kindness by the queen, the fern leaves used to cover their corpses became the antidote for their venom. That plant is called xiayue, and it only grows within the borders of Baiue. Sunlong finished. Is the legend true? Can it be believed? The merchants asked anxiously. Buddy, this concerns life and death. Don't joke around with us. Sunlong smiled but said nothing, refusing to speak more after telling Xielian the tale. Tiansheng turned towards Aziao. Xiaoge, what's the red-clad Gaga? Is what the red-clad Gaga said true? After a moment of hesitation, Aziao replied, Whether the legend is true, I do not know, but the xiayue plant does grow within the walls of Baiue, and it is indeed the antidote for the scorpion snake venom. Meaning the only way to live after getting bitten is to venture into the kingdom of Baiue? Xielian said. No wonder so many caravans passed through Baiue territory despite knowing the deadly rumors. It wasn't that they were defiantly and stubbornly went to seek their own deaths, but rather if they didn't go, they would most certainly die. The scorpion snake was the totem of the evil master of Baiue, and she also controlled them. The appearance of these snakes was no mere coincidence. With only a few heavenly officials like them here, there was no way they could ensure the absolute safety of the entire merchant group, and there was no telling how many more snakes would show. Xielian raised 2 fingers and pressed them against his temple, trying to connect with the heavenly communication array to see if he could shamelessly borrow more junior officials. No dice. He couldn't connect to the array. He couldn't reach out at all. Xielian lowered his hand and wondered. I didn't use up all my spiritual powers, did I? I calculated this morning and there was still a little bit left. He turned to Nanfeng and Fu Yao. Can either of you try to enter the communication array? I'm getting no connection. After a moment, the other 2 also looked grim. I can't get in either, Nanfeng said. There were cases where the connection would become fuzzy near highly evil areas. Auras potent enough to diminish the powers of various heavenly officials, and sometimes cut them off completely. It seemed that the situation they were in now. Xielian paced back and forth and wondered aloud. It might be because we're too close to the kingdom of Baiue, so the communication array is blocked. Just then, from the corner of his eye, there was a flash of red. Nanfeng and Fu Yao were busy trying to reconnect with the communication array, and everyone else was occupied checking for wounds on their bodies. The boy Tiansheng was anxiously holding tightly to old man Zhang and didn't notice the wine-red scorpion snake soundlessly climbing up his spine, curling near the neck and opening its mouth. However, the fangs were not aiming at Tiansheng's neck, but at Sunlong's arm right next to it. The snake leaned back, then pounced.